All right, so get ready for some seriously weird stuff today. We're diving deep, and I mean deep, into Sumerian mythology. But, and here's the kicker, we're going to see how it connects to magic, like actual magic.
And not just, the pull a rabbit out of a hat kind of magic. We're talking about the ancient stuff, the beliefs and practices that shaped civilizations.
Right. We asked you guys for excerpts from, and this is a doozy, the Complete Simon Necronomicon.
Which, gotta say, is a wild ride in itself, even if you don't buy into all the, shall we say, more out there claims.
Exactly. And we're not going to try summoning any Lovecraftian horrors today, safety first and all that, but we are going to unpack what makes this book so fascinating, so controversial, even today.
Because, and this is what always gets me, these ancient Sumerian beliefs, I mean, they vanished thousands of years ago, yet here we are still talking about them, still finding these weird echoes of them in the most unexpected places.
Like we're tracing the DNA of ideas, right? Back to the source code. And trust me, finding out where these concepts originated, that's my jam. So first things first, let's get oriented. Sumeria, ancient civilization, modern-day Iraq. Why does it matter so much for understanding magic and mythology?
Think of it like this. Sumeria is like that wellspring, one of the earliest civilizations, right? And their whole worldview, their myths, their ideas about gods, the cosmos, it influenced practically everything that came after, like ripples spreading out, touching Babylonian myths, Assyrian beliefs, heck, even leaving these faint traces in later Abrahamic traditions.
Wow, okay, so Sumeria is like the OG source code, at least when it comes to these mystical ideas. But what was it about their culture that made their mythology so, I don't know, so potent, so enduring?
Well, the Necronomicon, it emphasizes a few key things. For example, you've got the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Now, we see rivers, but they saw something more like divinely ordained boundaries, symbols of order in a chaotic world.
So even their landscape was like infused with this sense of the sacred.
Exactly. And then there's the cities, right? Kish, each one had its own patron deity, its own city god, reinforced this idea that the divine was woven into everything.
Like they saw gods everywhere they looked.
They breathed it, lived it. It was just how they understood reality.
And then, of course, there's the whole thing about the Sumerian language, right? The Necronomicon makes some, let's say, interesting claims about its connection to other languages, even to this idea of an Aryan race.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a minefield, to be honest. We have to tread carefully there. The text tries to draw these lines between Sumerian and this concept of an Aryan race, like there's some shared origin, even some inherent magical connection. Now, we know this idea of a superior Aryan race, it's dangerous, a total distortion of history, used to justify all sorts of awful stuff.
Right, it's a good reminder that even if we find these old texts fascinating, we got to read them critically.
Absolutely. Crucial to remember, the Necronomicon is a product of its time. It might not outright endorse those harmful ideologies, but it reflects some of the ideas floating around when it was put together.
Gotcha. So context is key. We're not taking this book at face value. Now let's jump ahead a few thousand years, because how do H.P. Lovecraft and Aleister Crowley, two figures who, on the surface, couldn't be more different, how do they fit into all of this Sumerian stuff? We're talking cosmic horror alongside mystical rituals. How do those two worlds collide?
That's where things get really interesting, see? Because despite their different styles, different approaches, one's obsessed with cosmic dread, the other with personal power and magic, both Lovecraft and Crowley, they drew heavily on Sumerian mythology.
Wait, seriously, Cthulhu tentacles and Crowley's rituals. Tell me more.
It's more about shared themes than, like, a direct copy-paste. Lovecraft, he wove Sumerian deities and concepts into his stories. His ancient ones, those beings beyond human comprehension, they often parallel ancient Sumerian gods.
So Lovecraft wasn't just borrowing names, he was tapping into the core of those Sumerian myths.
Exactly. Take Tiamat, for example. She's this primordial goddess in Sumerian mythology, monstrous, serpentine, all about the untamed forces of nature. Now compare that to Cthulhu, this massive tentacled thing slumbering beneath the waves, waiting to wake up and unleash chaos. Both embody this power that's ancient, immense, totally alien to us, something that predates humanity and could wipe us out like nothing.
Wow, so Lovecraft took these Sumerian figures, cranked up the strangeness to 11, and then injected them with this, like, cosmic dread.
Exactly. He tapped into that primal fear, that sense of cosmic insignificance that the Sumerians themselves grappled with in their myths.
And Crowley, He's less about the horror, right? More about harnessing power.
Right, he was all about personal power, but just as fascinated by Sumerian magic and its potential to unlock hidden forces within ourselves.
Okay, so we've got Sumeria, this ancient wellspring of magical ideas. We've got Lovecraft and Crowley, these modern figures drinking from that well. But where does the Necronomicon, this supposedly ancient text, where does it fit into all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Necronomicon, even though it's Lovecraft's creation, acts as this bridge. Claims to be full of genuine Sumerian magical texts. Whether that's true or not, that's a whole other can of worms.
Right. But Crowley, he ate it up.
Hook, line, and sinker. He saw it as this blueprint, a way to unlock hidden knowledge and potentially very dangerous power.
So even if Lovecraft made it up, the Necronomicon becomes this conduit. Ancient Sumerian beliefs sneaking their way into modern occultism.
And that's where the real power is, right? It blurs the lines, fiction, reality, ancient myth, modern practice. People are fascinated by it, but also afraid of it.
And speaking of terrifying, we got to talk about Azek Thoth, this figure from the Necronomicon. He's the stuff of nightmares.
Oh, absolutely. He's like that embodiment of be careful what you wish for. A powerful entity, but totally insane, linked to forbidden magic, to chaos, that kind of knowledge that can shatter your mind. Lovecraft didn't directly take him, but you can see echoes of Azek Thoth and Lovecraft's mad Arab character.
Like some kind of ancient mythological game of telephone. One idea sparking another across centuries. So what's the Sumerian connection with this Azag Thoth?
Well, the Necronomicon links him to two things. Azag, Sumerian term for enchanter or magician, and then you've got Thoth, the Egyptian god of magic and wisdom. So a bit of a mashup, but the core message is clear. Be wary of digging too deep. Some knowledge has a hefty price tag.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme, isn't it? The idea that some things are better left alone. And it's not just Lovecraft and Crowley who were drawn to this idea. The ancient Sumerians themselves seemed to grapple with this concept of forbidden knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example. Gilgamesh's quest for immortality, it ends in failure, right? A reminder that some mysteries are beyond our grasp, some doors are meant to stay closed.
But Pandora's box, isn't it? Once you open it, there's no going back.
Exactly. And speaking of powerful figures, the Necronomicon draws this really interesting parallel between a powerful female figure from Sumerian mythology, the goddess Ishtar, and surprisingly, Aleister Crowley's own system of magic.
Now, hold on a minute. How does that even work? We're talking ancient Mesopotamia and 20th century occultism. What's the link?
It's one of those little details that makes you realize how interconnected these ideas really are. You see, Ishtar, sometimes called the 15 in Sumerian texts, she was all about duality. Love and war, creation and destruction. She could give life, but she could also take it away. Worshipped by kings, but feared by warriors.
So not someone you'd want to cross, that's for sure.
No kidding. And here's the fascinating part. Crowley, in his own system of magic, he also emphasized this powerful female figure. Babylon. Now, they're not identical, obviously, but they both represent this idea of feminine power as this fundamental force in the universe. Alluring, intoxicating, but also potentially dangerous.
So both Ishtar and Babylon, they're like this potent mix of creation and destruction. It's like a force that's just woven into existence itself. It's like these archetypes, you know,
Yeah.
The wise old man, the terrible mother, the trickster. They just transcend cultures and time periods, don't they? Like they speak to something deeper in us.
Absolutely. These primal forces, these archetypal energies, we just recognize them on this instinctual level. And that's what's so fascinating about mythology, right? It's like a mirror to the human soul. All those shared hopes and fears staring right back at us.
It's like we're hardwired to recognize these figures and what they represent.
Yeah.
And speaking of ancient echoes, the Necronomicon points out some surprising links between Sumerian beliefs and, wait for it, modern witchcraft. I gotta admit, I was not expecting that one. What's the story there?
This is where it gets really interesting, especially if you're into the history of witchcraft and paganism. A lot of practices we associate with modern witchcraft, particularly Wicca, they have roots in ancient traditions. And the Necronomicon highlights something called the cross-quarter days as a prime example.
Cross-quarter days. Okay, you're gonna have to refresh my memory on that one. What are they exactly?
Basically, they're the midpoints between the solstices and equinoxes, so like the points in between the seasons. Now, in modern pagan traditions, Wicca especially these days, are celebrated as holidays. Candlemas, Beltane, Lammas, Samhain.
Wait, hold the phone. Are you saying those holidays, the ones people associate with witchcraft, they actually have roots in ancient Sumeria? That's blowing my mind right now.
That's what the Necronomicon suggests. It even draws these connections between the names of the holidays and the names of these mythical beasts linked to astrological signs, like Lammas, the August holiday, might come from Lammas, the name of a Sumerian beast connected to the constellation Leo, which is prominent in August.
Wow. Who knew ancient Sumeria was so influential? Talk about history coming to life. It really makes you wonder what other modern practices might have roots in these ancient cultures.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's what makes this whole thing so fascinating to explore. We tend to think of ancient cultures as so different from our own, but then you uncover these connections, these threads that link us back through time. It makes you realize maybe we're not so different after all.
It's like looking through a kaleidoscope. Same pieces of colored glass, but you turn it slightly and bam, a whole new pattern emerges.
Perfect analogy. And sometimes those patterns, they reveal these unexpected connections, hidden influences that make us rethink what we thought we knew about history. And speaking of challenging assumptions, the Necronomicon also touches on this darker aspect of Sumerian beliefs, the idea of witch hunts, or at least practices that share a chilling resemblance to the witch hunts of later centuries.
Okay, now that sounds ominous. Witch hunts in ancient Sumeria. What's the deal there?
Well, the thing is, the history of magic, it's got this dark side, often intertwined with persecution, even violence. The Necronomicon refers to something called the Maklu texts, ancient Sumerian writings that, among other things, include spells for getting rid of enemies, protecting yourself from harm.
So like ancient Sumerian curses or protection spells.
Yeah, but with a dark twist. The text talks about how these Maklu texts often describe burning images of witches and sorcerers to make the banishments work.
Burning images, man, that sounds eerily similar to the witch hunts of the Middle Ages. The Inquisition, all of that. It's kind of chilling how these ancient fears and practices, they just echo through time.
It is a chilling parallel. And while we don't want to draw a direct line from ancient Sumeria to the horrors of the Inquisition, the Necronomicon does highlight this, let's say, unsettling connection between ancient beliefs about magic and the very real persecution of people accused of witchcraft. It's happened throughout history, unfortunately.
It's like this reminder that magic, religion, persecution, they can be disturbingly close together, a dark thread running through history. But even with these darker elements, the Necronomicon really emphasizes the power of language in Sumerian magic. Like words themselves had this power, this magic, all their own. And we're going to dive deeper into that right after this quick break.
I'm excited to dig into that. The way words were used in Sumerian magic, the sounds, the incantations, they offer this incredible window into their whole worldview. It really is something, you know. For the ancient Sumerians, words weren't just like tools. They were active forces, shaping reality, influencing the spirit world, even, and this is wild, bending the will of the gods.
Whoa, okay, so we're not just talking about like spells here, but something way deeper, more fundamental about how they saw language itself. So, like, give me some examples. What did these words, these powerful words, what do they actually sound like?
Well, the Necronomicon, it's got a bunch of these incantations, many straight up written in Sumerian. One that always sticks with me is Silka Jilka Besa Besa. It's supposed to be this potent exorcism, a way to ward off demonic forces.
Zulcha, Silka, Besa, Besa. Man, even knowing nothing about Sumerian, those words, they got this weight to them. Like you could almost feel the power, even after all this time.
That's exactly what's so captivating, I think. It's like the words themselves carry a sort of echo of what they're supposed to do. A little glimpse into a time when that line between physical and spiritual, it was way more blurry than we imagine it today.
Like stepping into a different reality where words had this tangible power. Did the Sumerians believe that the sounds themselves were magical? That just saying these words, they were tapping into something primal?
That's exactly what the text suggests. Words weren't abstract symbols to them. They had this, like, sympathetic resonance. Imagine a world where a chant, spoken with the right intent, could heal someone, or banish an enemy, or even mess with the seasons.
Okay, now that sounds like something straight out of a fantasy novel, but here we are talking about it like it was just how things were. So I've got Sumerian influence on Lovecraft, on Crowley, even on modern witchcraft. We dug into ancient incantations, the power of words, and those dangers of forbidden knowledge. Man, it's been a ride.
And it all boils down to this question. Why are we still so drawn to these ancient myths, these whispers from a civilization long gone? What is it that still fascinates us, maybe even scares us about them?
Like, why do we keep going back to these wells of ancient knowledge, searching for something?
Maybe, deep down, we see a bit of ourselves in those myths. Our fears, our wants, that fascination with the mysteries of existence.
So the Necronomicon, with all its weirdness, its ancient lore and cosmic horror, it's not just some book of spells, right? It's like this window into our own minds, all those anxieties about the unknown.
Exactly. It reminds us that the past, it never really leaves us. Those ancient beliefs, those echoes of Sumerian magic, they're still shaping our imaginations, even how we see the world in ways we probably don't even realize. Makes you wonder, what if there's more to the universe than we can see? What if those myths, those whispers from the dawn of civilization, they hold truths we've forgotten? Or maybe truths we're just too scared to face?
Okay, that's a pretty heavy thought. That the world might be a much stranger, much more mysterious place than we give it credit for.
It is, and that sense of wonder, that touch of, well, cosmic dread, that's part of what makes exploring these topics so fascinating. The Necronomicon, for all its strangeness and controversy, it's like this doorway into these enduring mysteries. Reminds us that there's still things out there we don't understand, depths we haven't plumbed, and maybe, just maybe, some doors are best left closed.
We've just scratched the surface here. But before we wrap things up with the Necronomicon and those Sumerian echoes, we got to ask, what does it all mean? What have we learned from this journey into ancient myths and modern magic?
Yeah, the million-dollar question. Honestly, I think the answer is different for everyone. But if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's that the past, it never truly fades away. These ancient beliefs, these traces of Sumerian magic, they're still woven into the fabric of our world. You see it in our stories, our movies, our video games, even our spiritual practices.
Like we're all connected by this web of belief and imagination stretching all the way back to the beginning of civilization.
Precisely. And when we explore those connections, when we trace those threads back to their source, we understand more than just the past. We understand ourselves and the world around us a bit better.
It's like those Sumerian echoes are still whispering to us after all this time, reminding us of the power of myth, magic, and all those mysteries that continue to shape our world. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we'll be diving into the legacy of the Necronomicon, this controversial and fascinating book. We'll explore what its enduring appeal says about us and our fascination with the unknown. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back diving into the final part of the Necronomicon and those Sumerian echoes. We've been talking about myths, about ancient gods, all that good stuff. But the Necronomicon, it goes a step further. It doesn't just tell the stories. It's like it's offering a way to, to actually access them, to tap into those ancient powers, even if it gets a little, well, dangerous.
And that's what makes it so, captivating. And more than a little scary, to be honest. It's like a guidebook, right? A grimoire, they call it. Forbidden knowledge, potentially dangerous magic. You've got ancient rituals, summoning things from beyond our reality, messing with forces that could crush us.
It's like holding a lightning bolt. Yeah, it's powerful, it's exciting, but one wrong move and you're fried. But here's the thing, even if it's fictional, Lovecraft himself said he made it up, the Necronomicon, it still gets to people. Why do you think that is? Why are we so drawn to it, even if we know it's not, like, real?
I think it's because, deep down, even though it's made up, it touches on something very human. That fascination with the unknown, that desire to break our limits, maybe even that fear that there are things out there we can't control. Things that might not be too friendly to humanity, let's say.
It's like we're afraid of the dark, but we're also drawn to it, right? Can't help but peek into the shadows, even if we know something might be looking back.
Exactly. And the Necronomicon, it dangles this possibility, this idea that maybe, just maybe, there's a way to access that forbidden knowledge, to unlock something powerful within ourselves, to talk to things beyond our wildest imagination. It's a powerful cocktail. No wonder people are still drawn to it, even if they're smart enough to be a little skeptical.
So it's not just about the magic itself. It's about testing those boundaries, right? Seeing how far we can go. It reminds me of that quote, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." The Necronomicon, with all its ancient stuff and cosmic horror, it gives you that same feeling, the awe, the wonder, even if it's a little scary.
That's it, isn't it? The Necronomicon, it reminds us that the universe is vast, mysterious, and honestly, kind of indifferent to us. A bit humbling, even a little terrifying when you really think about it.
Yeah, like looking up at the night sky, all those stars, and realizing just how small we are, how much we don't know.
Exactly. And that feeling, that awe mixed with a little existential dread, that's something the ancient Sumerians understood. They're myths. They're full of these powerful gods, these forces that just, they toy with human destiny. Like our wants, our fears, they don't matter much in the grand scheme of things.
So the Necronomicon, even though it was written, what, in the 20th century or something, it still taps into something ancient. That feeling of being small, insignificant.
Absolutely. And it's that awareness, that understanding of our place, or maybe our lack of a place, that makes the Necronomicon more than just a scary story. It reflects our deepest fears, but also our greatest desires. It reminds us that some mysteries, we may never solve them.
And you know what? Maybe that's okay. Maybe some things should stay hidden. Some doors are better left closed. Isn't that part of what makes life interesting? A little mystery, a little fear.
Perhaps. But one thing's for sure. The Necronomicon, with its Sumerian myths, its ancient magic, its cosmic horror, it's stuck with us. It shows just how powerful myths can be, how alluring the forbidden is, and how much we crave knowledge even if it might drive us crazy.
It's been a wild ride, exploring the Necronomicon, Sumerian magic, all of it. From the beginnings of civilization to the edges of cosmic horror, we've seen it all. Ancient gods, forbidden rituals, the power of belief. And now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think we're left with more questions than answers. And honestly, that feels kind of fitting.
It does, doesn't it? The Necronomicon, it reminds us that the world is far stranger, far more mysterious than we often realize. It's a reminder to be curious, sure, but also cautious. Because sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create ourselves.
And on that note, folks, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Remember, the universe is full of mysteries, some more unsettling than others. But hey, whether you're into ancient myths, exploring the occult, or just looking up at the night sky, always remember, keep a critical mind, an open heart, and maybe a little bit of skepticism close at hand. You never know what might be lurking out there in the darkness.